The morning sun painted golden streaks across the massive glass windows of Incheon Galactic Spaceport. Hye-jin stood in front of the mirror in the staff room, making sure her dark blue uniform was perfect. She smoothed down her collar one more time and checked that her name tag was straight. Today was her first day as a first-class cabin attendant, and she wanted everything to be just right. "You look fine," said Ryan, her friend who had been working in first class for 2 years. "Stop worrying so much." Hye-jin took a deep breath. "I know, but this isn't just any flight. It's the Seoul Alpha Centauri route. The most expensive tickets in the galaxy are for this route." The Seoul Alpha Centauri route was famous. It was a status symbol among the rich and powerful to travel on this particular flight. A single first-class ticket cost more than what most people earned in 5 years. "Just remember your training," Ryan said, picking up her tablet. "Check their documents carefully, make sure they follow the dress code, and always be polite but firm." Hye-jin nodded and picked up her own tablet. The passenger list showed only 8 names for first class today. That was normal. Few could afford such expensive tickets. The 2 flight attendants walked through the spotless corridors of the spaceport. Their shoes clicked against the polished floor as they made their way to Gate A1, where their ship waited. The Stellar Odyssey was the pride of Stellar Airways' fleet. Its sleek silver hull gleamed under the morning light, and its first-class section was famous for having private rooms instead of just seats. "Good morning, ladies," said Do-Won, the senior flight attendant. He was checking something on the main control panel. "Hye-jin, are you ready for your first day in first class?" "Yes, sir," Hye-jin said confidently. She had studied harder than anyone else to earn this promotion. She knew every rule and procedure by heart. The next 2 hours went by quickly as they prepared the cabin. Hye-jin made sure every pillow was fluffed perfectly, every screen was working, and every private room was stocked with the expensive drinks that first-class passengers expected. Finally, it was time for boarding to begin. Hye-jin stood at her post near the first-class entrance, tablet ready to check documents. The first few passengers arrived exactly as she expected, wearing expensive suits and dresses, carrying small designer bags, their documents all in perfect order. Then she saw him. A man walked up to the first-class entrance wearing old jeans and a wrinkled T-shirt. His sneakers were scuffed, and he carried a worn backpack. He looked like he had just rolled out of bed. Hye-jin blinked in surprise. This had to be a mistake. "Good morning, sir," she said politely. "May I see your boarding pass?" The man pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. Hye-jin's eyes widened slightly when she saw it was indeed a first-class ticket. But something wasn't right. The documentation looked different from the others she had seen. "I'm sorry, sir, but I need to verify this," she said, keeping her voice professional. "Also, I must remind you that Stellar Airways has a strict dress code for first-class travel. We require business or formal attire." The man smiled. It was a kind smile, but Hye-jin didn't let that affect her judgment. She had been trained to be polite but firm, no matter how nice a passenger seemed. "Is there a problem?" he asked. His voice was gentle, with a hint of amusement. "Yes, sir. I'm afraid there are several issues. Your documentation needs additional verification, and your current attire doesn't meet our first-class standards. I can assist you with rebooking in our economy class section, where the dress code is more relaxed." A small crowd was gathering now. Some of the other first-class passengers were watching with interest. Hye-jin could feel their eyes on her, but she stood her ground. Rules were rules, and she was not going to break them on her first day. The man looked at her name tag. "Hye-jin," he said slowly. "You're new here, aren't you?" "This is my first day in first class, sir, but I assure you I am fully trained in our policies and procedures." He nodded, still smiling. "And these policies and procedures are important to you." "They are important to Stellar Airways, sir. We maintain the highest standards in the industry. That's why our first-class service is considered the best in the galaxy." The man's smile grew wider. He glanced at the growing line behind him and then back at Hejin. Well, we wouldn't want to hold up other passengers. Economy class, you said. Yes, sir. I can have someone escort you. No need, he said cheerfully. I know the way. Thank you for your dedication to the rules, Hejin. With that, he turned and walked away, heading toward the economy class entrance. Hejin watched him go, feeling slightly confused. Most passengers would have argued or demanded to speak to a supervisor. This man had accepted her decision with a smile. Do-won appeared at her side. Everything okay here? I saw there was some kind of issue. Yes, sir, Hejin said. A passenger had questionable documentation and didn't meet the dress code requirements. I redirected him to economy class. Do-won nodded approvingly. Good. We can't make exceptions, even if passengers are nice about it. Did you get his name? Hejin looked down at her tablet, where she had scanned the man's ticket. It says, Kim Ta-shak. She frowned. That's odd. The system isn't showing any other information. Do-won's face went pale. What did you say? Kim Ta-shak. Is something wrong? But Do-won wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at his own tablet, his hands shaking slightly. Oh no, he whispered. Oh no, no, no. Sir, what's wrong? Do-won looked at her with wide eyes. Hejin, did this man have messy black hair, wearing casual clothes, carrying an old backpack? Yes, that's him. He went to economy class. Sir, you're scaring me. What's going on? Do-won grabbed her arm. Hejin, that was Big Shaq. The Big Shaq, the owner of Stellar Corporation. Hejin felt her stomach drop. Everyone knew about Big Shaq, the mysterious trillionaire who owned not just Stellar Airways, but hundreds of other companies across the galaxy. He was famous for traveling in disguise, checking on his businesses personally. Some people said he never wore expensive clothes, preferring to blend in with ordinary people. No, she whispered. No, it can't be. It is, Do-won said. I've seen his pictures in the company files. That's him. You just refused first-class service to our owner. Hejin's legs felt weak. She had to lean against the wall to steady herself. What? What do we do? I don't know, Do-won said. This has never happened before. Maybe we can go to economy class and apologize. No, Hejin said firmly, straightening up. We have a job to do. We need to finish boarding the other passengers. Do-won stared at her. Hejin, you don't understand. This is Big Shaq we're talking about. He could fire all of us with one word. Then he will, Hejin said, though her voice trembled slightly. But right now, we have passengers waiting to board. We need to maintain our standards. Isn't that what you always say? Do-won opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Finally, he nodded. You're right. Let's finish boarding. But afterward, I need to report this to headquarters. Hejin returned to her post, her heart pounding but her face calm. As she checked the documents of the next passenger, she couldn't help thinking about the kind smile of the man in the worn-out sneakers. Had he been testing her? Was this some kind of inspection? Through the next hour of preparation for takeoff, Hejin did her job perfectly, even though her hand shook slightly whenever she wasn't being watched. Every time she walked past economy class, she resisted the urge to look for him. She had made her decision based on the rules. If that decision cost her her job, well, at least she had stood by her principles. The flight took off smoothly, rising up through the atmosphere until Earth was a blue marble below them. As Hejin served expensive champagne to the first-class passengers, she wondered if she would ever do this again. Probably not. No one survived refusing service to the company owner. Hejin, Ryan whispered during a quiet moment. I heard what happened. Are you okay? No, Hejin admitted. But there's nothing I can do about it now. We have a 7-hour flight ahead of us. Let's just focus on doing our jobs well while we still have them. Ryan squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, you did what you thought was right. That counts for something. Jin smiled weakly. Thanks. I just hope Big Shaq thinks so too. As the Stellar Odyssey cruised through space toward Alpha Centauri, Jin kept working, kept smiling, kept making sure every first-class passenger had exactly what they needed. She tried not to think about the man in economy class, the man whose company name was written in giant letters on the side of this very ship. She had stood by the rules. That would have to be enough. What Jin didn't know was that in economy class, Kim Ta-shak was sitting comfortably in his seat, writing notes on his tablet with a big smile on his face. At the top of his notes was a single sentence. Found her. 3 hours into the flight to Alpha Centauri. Jin's tablet buzzed with an urgent message. She had been arranging fresh flowers in one of the first-class private rooms when the notification came. The message was from company headquarters. Her hands shook as she opened it. This was it. She was about to be fired. But when she read the message, her eyes widened in surprise. Keep working as normal. Say nothing to the passengers. We'll handle situation after landing. Management. Jin took a deep breath. At least they weren't firing her mid-flight. She had 4 more hours to enjoy her dream job before it all ended. In economy class, Kim Ta-shak watched the flight attendants through observant eyes. He saw how they treated every passenger with care, but he noticed something interesting. The economy class service wasn't as good as it used to be. Some flight attendants looked bored, and others were too busy chatting with each other to notice when passengers needed help. He pulled out his tablet again and made more notes. This was exactly why he liked to travel in disguise. People showed their true nature when they didn't know who was watching. Back in first class, Do-won was having a hard time staying calm. He kept checking his tablet for messages from headquarters. Every time he passed Jin, he gave her worried looks. Stop that, Jin whispered to him during their break. You're making the passengers nervous. How can you be so calm? Do-won asked. Do you know what Big Shaq could do? He could shut down this entire route if he wanted to. Worrying won't change anything, Jin said. Besides, I checked his documentation carefully. It really did look strange. I was doing my job. That's not how the big bosses will see it, Do-won said, shaking his head. Just then, a soft bell rang from one of the first-class rooms. Jin checked her tablet. It was Mr. Park, a businessman who traveled this route often. I'll handle it, she said, grateful for the excuse to end this conversation. She walked to Mr. Park's room and knocked gently before entering. How may I help you, sir? Mr. Park looked up from his business papers. Ah, Jin. I couldn't help but overhear some talk among the other attendants. Did something happen during boarding? Jin kept her face professional. Everything is fine, sir. Would you like me to refresh your drink? Come now, Mr. Park said kindly. I travel this route twice a month. I know when something's wrong. The whole first-class cabin is buzzing with whispers about Big Shaq being on board. Jin felt her face grow hot. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't discuss other passengers. Mr. Park smiled. You know, I've met Big Shaq once. Most interesting man I've ever talked to. Do you know why he's so successful? Despite herself, Jin was curious. Why, sir? Because he values honesty and dedication above everything else, even above money. Mr. Park sipped his drink. If I were you, I wouldn't worry too much. Jin thanked him and left the room, feeling slightly better. But her peace didn't last long. Halfway through the flight, the ship hit some turbulence. It wasn't dangerous, but it was enough to make the passengers nervous. Jin and the other attendants went through their safety checks, making sure everyone was comfortable. As she walked past the divider between first class and economy, Jin couldn't help glancing through. She saw him immediately. Kim Ta-shak was helping an elderly woman who had spilled her drink during the turbulence. He was using his own handkerchief to clean up the mess, waving away the economy class attendant who had finally noticed the situation. Jin quickly looked away and returned to her duties, but she couldn't forget what she had seen. The richest man in the galaxy was cleaning up a spilled drink with his own hands. He-Jin. Ryan called her over. Look at this. He-Jin went to where her friend was standing by the staff tablet. On the screen was a news article from just minutes ago. The headline made her heart stop. Breaking. Big Shaq makes surprise inspection of Stellar Airways flights. It's all over the news, Ryan said. Someone at the spaceport recognized him and posted about it. Every business channel is talking about it. He-Jin felt dizzy. Now the whole world would know about her mistake. The article had more details. Apparently, Kim Ta-Shak had been making surprise inspections of his companies for the past month. He had visited factories, offices, and now flights. The article praised his hands-on approach to management. There's even a picture, Ryan said, scrolling down. The picture showed Kim Ta-Shak at another spaceport last week. He was wearing the same worn-out sneakers and carrying the same old backpack. The article explained that he believed in seeing his businesses as a regular customer would see them. As He-Jin read the article, she began to understand something. When she had stopped him at the first-class entrance, she hadn't just been following the rules. She had been protecting the standards that he himself had created. But that didn't mean she would keep her job. The last 2 hours of the flight passed in a blur. He-Jin did her work perfectly, determined to be professional until the very end. She served meals, answered questions, and helped passengers prepare for landing, all while trying not to think about what waited for her on the ground. As the ship began its descent toward Alpha Centauri's main spaceport, He-Jin took one last look around the first-class cabin. The lights of the binary star system shone through the windows, making everything glow with golden light. She would miss this view. The landing was smooth. As the passengers began to leave, He-Jin stood at her post, saying goodbye to each one. Mr. Park patted her shoulder as he passed. "Remember what I said," he whispered. Finally, all the first-class passengers were gone. He-Jin watched through the divider as the economy-class passengers filed out. She saw Kim Ta-Shak stand up, still holding his old backpack. To her surprise, he was one of the last to leave, letting others go ahead of him. Just before he reached the exit, he turned and looked directly at her through the divider. Their eyes met for a moment. He smiled, that same kind smile from earlier. And then he was gone. "He-Jin," Do-One called. "There's someone here from headquarters." He-Jin turned to see a woman in a sharp business suit standing at the first-class entrance. She held a tablet and had a serious expression. "Ms. He-Jin," the woman said, "please come with me. Mr. Kim would like to speak with you." As He-Jin followed the woman off the ship, she held her head high. Whatever happened next, she had done her job well. She had maintained the standards that made Stellar Airways special. If that meant losing her job, then at least she would lose it with her principles intact. What she didn't know was that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The Stellar Corporation headquarters on Alpha Centauri was the tallest building He-Jin had ever seen. Its glass walls reflected the light of the twin suns, making the whole building shine like a diamond. As she followed the woman from headquarters through the lobby, He-Jin felt very small. "Please wait here," the woman said, leading her to a comfortable waiting room on the top floor. "Mr. Kim will see you soon." He-Jin sat down on one of the soft chairs. Her uniform still looked perfect. She had made sure of that before leaving the ship. If this was going to be her last day as a Stellar Airways employee, she would look professional until the end. Through the large windows, she could see spaceships taking off and landing at the spaceport. One of them was the Stellar Odyssey, preparing for its return journey to Earth. He-Jin watched it sadly. She would probably never work on that beautiful ship again. The door opened, and He-Jin jumped to her feet. Kim Ta-Shak walked in, still wearing his old jeans and wrinkled t-shirt. But something was different about him now. Maybe it was the way he moved, or the quiet confidence in his eyes. Now that she knew who he was, He-Jin wondered how she hadn't noticed it before. Please, sit down, he said kindly, taking the seat across from her. Would you like some tea? No, thank you, sir, Jin said, her voice barely a whisper. I insist, he said, pressing a button on the table. A robot glided in smoothly with 2 cups of tea. It's a special blend from Earth, my grandmother's recipe. Jin took the cup with shaking hands. The tea smelled wonderful, like flowers and sunshine. So, Kim Ta-shak said, sipping his tea, tell me about your first day in first class. Jin almost spilled her tea. Was he teasing her? But his face was serious and interested. It was going well, sir, she said carefully, until I made a terrible mistake. Did you? He raised his eyebrows. What mistake would that be? Jin put down her cup. Sir, I refused you entry to first class. I questioned your documentation. I sent you to economy class. I embarrassed you in front of other passengers. He took another sip of tea. Let's look at each of those things. First, you refused me entry because your clothes didn't meet the dress code, sir. And your documentation looked unusual. Were those good reasons to refuse entry? Yes, sir, Jin said, then quickly added, I mean, they would be good reasons for any other passenger. I should have recognized you. Should you? He interrupted. How many times have you seen my picture? Jin thought about it. Only once or twice, sir. You're not in the media much. Exactly. And my documentation looked strange because it was different from the standard first-class documentation I was trained to recognize. Correct again. He smiled. So you followed your training perfectly. You maintained our standards exactly as you should have. Tell me, Jin, why did you become a flight attendant? The sudden change of topic confused her. I always wanted to work for Stellar Airways, sir. Since I was a little girl. My mother was a cleaner at the spaceport, and I used to watch the flight attendants walk by in their beautiful uniforms. They looked so professional, so dedicated. I wanted to be like them. And what do you think makes Stellar Airways special? Our standards, sir, Jin said without hesitation. We have the highest standards in the galaxy. That's why people trust us. That's why they pay so much to fly with us. We never compromise on quality or safety or service. Kim Ta-shak's smile grew wider. That's exactly right. And that's exactly why I'm not going to fire you. Jin blinked. You're not? No. He put down his tea and leaned forward. In fact, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. I've been worried about our standards lately. He stood up and walked to the window. 6 months ago, I started making surprise inspections of all my companies. Do you know what I found on other Stellar Airways flights? Jin shook her head. I found flight attendants who let passengers break rules because they were rich or famous. I found staff who cared more about making powerful friends than maintaining our standards. And in economy class today, I saw attendants who weren't giving their best service because they thought those passengers weren't important enough. He turned back to face her. But you, Jin, you treated everyone exactly the same. You followed our rules even when it might have cost you your job. Do you know how rare that is? Jin didn't know what to say. This wasn't at all what she had expected. I built this company on 2 things, Kim Ta-shak continued. High standards and equal treatment for everyone. That's why I travel in economy class sometimes. That's why I dress like this. I want to see how my companies treat ordinary people, not just the rich and powerful. He sat down again and pulled out his tablet. I've been reading your file. You worked as a cleaner while studying for your flight attendant certification. You had the highest scores in your training class. Every supervisor you've had has praised your attention to detail and dedication to rules. I just try to do my job well. Sir, Jin said quietly. And that's exactly what we need more of. He tapped something on his tablet. How would you like a new job, Jin? Her heart sank a little. So he was moving her away from flight service after all. "Don't worry," he said, seeing her expression. "You'll still be working with our flights. But instead of serving one route, you'll be helping me fix problems across our entire network." He-Jin's eyes widened. "Sir, I'm creating a new position, Deputy Director of Service Standards. You'll travel on different routes, train new staff, and help make sure everyone maintains the same high standards you showed today. Are you interested?" He-Jin couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But sir, I'm just a flight attendant. I don't have management experience." "You have something more important," he interrupted. "You have principles. You can't teach that in management school." He showed her the tablet. On it was a contract with a salary that made He-Jin's head spin. It was more money than she had ever imagined earning. "The money isn't the important part," Kim Ta-Shak said. "The important part is what you'll be doing, helping us stay true to our standards, making sure every passenger, whether they're in first class or economy, gets the service they deserve. What do you say?" He-Jin looked at the contract, then at Kim Ta-Shak's kind face. She thought about her mother, who had taught her that doing the right thing was more important than doing the easy thing. She thought about all the times she had watched Stellar Airways flights take off, dreaming of being part of something special. "Yes," she said firmly. "I would be honored, sir." Kim Ta-Shak's face lit up with a bright smile. "Excellent. And please, call me Ta-Shak. We'll be working closely together." As they discussed the details of her new job, He-Jin couldn't help but smile. She had started the day thinking she would lose her job. Instead, she had found her true calling, all because she had stood by her principles. "Oh, and He-Jin," Ta-Shak said as they finished their meeting, "keep the uniform. You might not wear it every day anymore. But I want you to remember something. Sometimes the biggest test of character is what you do when you think no one important is watching." He-Jin nodded, understanding perfectly. After all, she had just passed that test without even knowing it was a test. As she left the building that evening, she saw the Stellar Odyssey taking off, its silver hull gleaming in the sunset. But this time, watching it didn't make her sad. Instead, it made her excited for what tomorrow would bring. 6 months had passed since that fateful flight. He-Jin stood in front of a room full of new flight attendants at the Stellar Airways Training Center in Neo-Seoul. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, making the trainees' brand-new uniforms shine. "Today, I'm going to tell you a story," He-Jin said, looking at their eager faces. "It's a story about my first day in first class and how I accidentally refused entry to the owner of our company." The trainees gasped. Some of them already knew this story. It had become famous throughout Stellar Airways. But hearing it from He-Jin herself was different. "But this isn't just a story about making a mistake," He-Jin continued. "It's a story about why we have standards and why those standards matter more than any single passenger's status or wealth." She walked slowly between the rows of seats, just as she used to walk through the aisles of the Stellar Odyssey. "In the past 6 months, I've traveled on every route Stellar Airways flies. I've visited every spaceport we serve. And everywhere I go, I ask our staff the same question. Who is our most important passenger?" He-Jin stopped at the front of the room again. "What do you think? Who is our most important passenger?" A young trainee raised her hand. "The ones in first class." "That's what many people think," He-Jin said. "But no, anyone else." Another trainee spoke up. "The frequent flyers." "No." He-Jin smiled. "Our most important passenger is the one sitting in front of us right now. Whether they're in first class or economy, whether they're wearing expensive clothes or old sneakers, whether they're famous or unknown. At that moment, they are our most important passenger." She tapped her tablet, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed the Stellar Airways Service Manual. "These standards aren't just rules," He-Jin said. "They're promises. Promises we make to every single person who chooses to fly with us. When we maintain these standards, we keep those promises." The door at the back of the room opened quietly. He-Jin saw Kim Ta-Shak slip in, wearing one of his famous casual outfits. The trainees didn't notice him. They didn't know what he looked like. He gave He-jin a small nod and stayed at the back, watching. "Let me tell you what happened after that first day," He-jin continued. "In the past 6 months, we've made some big changes at Stellar Airways. We've improved our economy class service to match the quality of first class. We've created new training programs to help our staff understand why standards matter. And most importantly, we've started treating every passenger with the same respect and care, no matter who they are." She showed them some numbers on the hologram. "Our customer satisfaction scores have gone up by 40%. Our employee satisfaction has improved even more. And our profits, they've increased too, because people trust us. They know that when they fly Stellar Airways, they'll get the same high-quality service every time." A trainee raised her hand. "But what if we make a mistake? What if we get something wrong?" "Good question," He-jin said. "Everyone makes mistakes. I certainly did. But there's a difference between making an honest mistake and choosing to lower our standards. If you make a mistake while trying to maintain our standards, that's okay. We can fix mistakes. But if you choose to ignore our standards, that's not okay. That's breaking our promise to our passengers." She showed them another hologram, this time of the Stellar Odyssey. "Every day, millions of people trust us to carry them safely across the galaxy. They trust us because they know we have standards, and we stick to them. That trust is worth more than any amount of money or any important person's approval." Kim Ta-shak smiled from the back of the room. He had heard He-jin give this speech before, but it never got old. She was everything he had hoped for when he gave her this job: dedicated, principled, and able to inspire others with her story. "Now," He-jin said, "let me show you our new service protocols. We've made them simpler, but stricter. Every passenger gets the same high level of service, every time." The training session continued for another hour. He-jin explained each standard in detail, using stories from her own experience to show why they mattered. The trainees listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions. After the session, as the trainees filed out for their lunch break, Kim Ta-shak came forward. "Excellent work as always, He-jin," he said. "You've really transformed our training program." "Thank you, sir. Ta-shak," He-jin said, still sometimes forgetting he preferred his first name. "But I couldn't have done it without your support." "No," he said firmly. "You did this. I just gave you the opportunity. You're the one who showed everyone why standards matter." They walked to the window together, looking out at the spaceport where ships were taking off and landing. "Do you miss being a flight attendant?" he asked. He-jin thought about it. "Sometimes, I miss the feeling of making one passenger's journey special. But now I get to help make every passenger's journey special, through our staff. That's even better." "Speaking of staff," Ta-shak said, checking his tablet, "the latest numbers are in. Employee turnover is down 70% since you started the new training program, and complaints about inconsistent service have dropped to almost zero." "That's good," He-jin said, "but numbers aren't everything. What matters is that our people understand why we do things the way we do them." Ta-shak nodded approvingly. "Exactly. That's why I knew you were the right person for this job. You don't just follow the standards, you believe in them." They watched as a group of flight attendants walked across the spaceport below, their uniforms neat and professional. Among them was Ryan, who had recently been promoted to senior flight attendant. "You know," Ta-shak said, "some of my advisors thought I was crazy to promote a junior flight attendant to such an important position. They said you needed management experience, or a business degree, or connections in the industry." "What did you tell them?" He-jin asked. "I told them to wait and see." He smiled. "And now they've seen. You've done more to improve our service in 6 months than all their expensive consultants did in 6 years." He-jin felt her face grow warm at the praise. "I just try to remember what you taught me." Sometimes the biggest test of character is what you do when you think no one important is watching. And now everyone is watching, Shaq said. You've become quite famous in the company, you know. The flight attendant who refused Big Shaq. They tell your story in every training center across the galaxy. I hope they remember the right lesson from that story. Jin said. It's not about refusing service to anyone. It's about treating everyone with the same respect and following our standards no matter what. They'll remember, Shaq assured her, especially with you teaching them. As they walked back to their offices, Jin felt a deep sense of satisfaction. 6 months ago, she had thought her career was over because she stood by her principles. Instead, those same principles had led her to exactly where she needed to be. And somewhere in the galaxy, on a Stellar Airways flight, a passenger was receiving excellent service from a well-trained flight attendant who understood that standards matter, not because they were rules, but because they were promises. Promises that Jin had helped them learn to keep.